Just imagine a world where you will hold your entire future in the palm of your hand, when a tiny glowing crystal will guide you through an existence in which each day is more wonderful than the last, where it will be possible for you to obtain the fulfillment of every fantasy, the satisfaction of every vanity, the absolute attainment of every wish.
Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer presents the Saul David production of Logan's Run. A fantastic journey through a world beyond imagination. Welcome to the 23rd century. The perfect world of total pleasure. Imagine a world in which you need never be alone. You touch a switch, turn a dial, and the perfect lover steps into your arms. Every pleasure is yours to experience.
Runner!
There's just one catch.
When the tiny crystal in the palm of your hand flashes its final message, your time is up. Michael York is Logan.
Run, Logan!
Policeman in a perfect world.
No!
Trained to track down runners.
Run, Logan!
Until he is forced to run himself.
He's a runner!
Logan! I'm your friend, I understand. We all go crazy once in a while. But she's a runner, and it's over.
Overwhelming, am I not?
Bucks, an incredible being. More than human, more than machine. Diabolical guardian of the gateway to freedom. Or Logan and the woman who loves him.
Seen a face like that before. That must be the look of being old.
MGM takes you into a new age of adventure in the first motion picture of the 23rd century. Logan's Run. It begins where imagination ends.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron. I am joined here today with James.
Hi.
Who will be telling us a little bit about one of his old sci-fi favorite films called Logan's Run. Now, let's keep in mind, this is pre-Star Wars, only by 1 year, and visually there's going to be a big difference between these films. Even though it's not up to the quality of a Star Wars type of film, for its time, it was one of the big sci-fi entries in that genre. It's no 2001. Nothing could be a 2001, but it definitely, deserves a place in the evolution of the science fiction film genre. James, why don't you tell us a little bit about, where the heck this came from?
Well, I saw this in the theater in 1976. I'm kind of proud of that because I actually like this movie a lot. I like the music. I like the look of it. I like the atmosphere and Michael York. And it was, like you said, a big movie. This was a big MGM movie of the year. And sci-fi, while most of the things before Star Wars were kind of weak in the sci-fi area in the movie business because they really didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know their audience. And that's what made Star Wars so special. But besides that, it was a very big movie. It was based on a book by William F. Nolan. And the book is quite different. There's actually three Logan books, but they're very different. In the movie version, people, because of overpopulation or war or famine, we don't really know exactly. The book gets into some stuff. But like I said, let's keep it with the movie. People are expected to live only till 30. And that was their way of controlling the population. And to do that, there was, instead of just, exterminating people, which is kind of what they did, but they made it more of a religious type experience or a lottery type experience. And upon your 30th birthday, you would celebrate Carousel.
You would send to the next phase of your life.
And you would go to Carousel and you would hope to renew. And audiences would go a lot like the Roman Colosseum and cheer you on in helping you get to your next level of your evolution. And I guess by renew, maybe it's a reincarnation type thing, or you're on a different plane.
And people are happy about this.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. It's like going to a ball game. It's a lot of festival atmosphere, and that's how the movie starts, showcasing this special event. And up until then, there's different levels of society. Each age range has a different color, and it's signified by a crystal on the palm. And the color your crystal is signifies your age in general, and then it changes as you progress to the point where it starts blinking, and that's it. Your time is done. In the book, the age was 21. It had some different connotations. I think it had, when it was written, it was probably around the time of the 60s, and it didn't necessarily have anything to do, from what I understand, exactly like don't trust anybody over 30 type of stuff, but it was more of a youth-oriented society, and there was connotations about that. So in the movie, Michael York plays Logan. He's Logan 5. They tend to have a number designation as if, okay, after Logan 5, there'll be a new Logan, Logan 6. There's no parents. Children are, we're to guess, created in test tubes, or at the very least, if they're conceived in some way by a real egg donor and sperm donor, they don't know, who each other are.
Right.
They hope, there's comments about, she could be a wonderful mother to Logan 6 or whatever. He makes a couple jokes.
But early on, he shows curiosity of, that's interesting,
But it turns out, let me just say, Logan is what we would call a police officer, except he's called a Sandman. And that's, they're responsible for keeping general order, and also when people who are supposed to go to Carousel choose not to, they're called runners. And the Sandman's job is to put the runners to sleep. And they show that, and it's pretty interesting.
It sounds like a retirement in Blade Runner.
Yeah. It's an exciting movie how they show it, because there's this guy who, while they're actually at Carousel, they get notification that somebody is planning to run, and they go looking for him, and they chase him. It's a little cat and mouse type thing, and they finally get him and blast him, and he gets swept up and the body's gone. It's like it never happened.
Right, just completely disintegrate the person.
Yeah, there's a process where
cleaning crew comes in.
A robot comes and puts a spray.
The movie's also very visually, obviously, because it's a sci-fi, big, visually striking presentation, and one of the things that aligns itself with these different periods of time in people's lives, it's the color of their light matches the color of their clothing.
Yeah, it seems that was just a way to show the wardrobe to make it interesting. The ladies wear this sexy kind of outfit that's very revealing, no bras. It looked like maybe these little ballet shoes, and the guys would wear these cheesy tight pants and tunics or something.
So the way that they
lot of open chests and stuff like that.
Very
70s,
very typical 70s sci-fi type of clothing. Yeah. A lot of not sequins, but very shiny,
but that kind of
polyester type of stuff.
From what I've read, the society was supposed to have very few cares because it was controlled in such a way. Basically, the people, their job was to enjoy each other's company in a friendly way. There's hot tubs. There's something called a love shop for meeting up with some interesting people.
All types of like drugs, sex,
recreation,
any type of enjoyment. Yeah. It's encouraged.
And I guess the creators of this society figure, well, if we keep the people happy, they won't question that they have to die at 30. So it kind of gives it an interesting little overtone.
It has also a little bit of a Brave New World vibe to it, of that kind of society where it's so controlled that it's completely free and hedonistic.
And there is a little section where drugs are a part of it, because there's a little relaxing session in the evening in the Sandman's apartment, and Francis, his friend Richard Jordan, shows up with some ladies, and they throw some type of green pill into the air.
Yeah, and everything is
like everybody gets a little psychedelic.
But going back to those colors we talked about, from what I understand, it's clear when you're born, that stone on your hand, the crystal, and then at the age of 8, it turns yellow, and so do your clothing. You're wearing yellow. So the characters you see running around in yellow costumes are supposed to be 8 years old or older. Then at 16, you get green. Your palm changes, the crystal changes to green. At 23, you get red, which means this is your last cycle, if you will. Yeah. This is your final cycle before 30.
Yeah, and then if you're into red, you're like a red 2. They would say, you won't say you're 28, or 29 or 22 or whatever it is.
And as you get really close to the end, it'll start to blink red.
And then you go to Carousel. And it's a weird thing. This means more now to present day society. Back then, you figure when somebody was 30, they seemed like they were more like 40 or 50. Now, when you're 40 or 50, you seem more like you're 30. And in there, it was an interesting dynamic. People would go to plastic surgeons, and they didn't call them that. They called them the new you. And people would go and get a new face. Now, sometimes it would be exploited by people who were planning to run. They would change their identity or something.
But if not, why?
But if you
Vanity?
wanted to, yeah, it seemed like vanity. I guess it's part of the whole, like, the recreation thing.
So
and
a 25-year-old wants to look more like
that's the impression you get.
18-year-old?
Now, if you see the movie, I think Michael York looks older than 30. In fact, his character wasn't even supposed to be 30.
And Richard Jordan also.
Yeah, these guys were probably supposed to be like 26. Now, it's always like the old thing. And nowadays, they hire people who are age appropriate.
They look
but even
more
as
like
recent
those
as 90210, they're hiring like 30-year-olds to play high school kids. Luke Perry's got sideburns and, he didn't look anything like a teenager. But that's a different story. But anyway, so to follow up on the story, Logan comes across one of these runners. He takes some information. The police are supposed to go and, I guess, file a report. And during the filing period...
And the police look very different. They're a group. They're identifiable.
Yeah, they're wearing a black outfit.
They have a special costume they wear.
Really great gun.
They stick out from the crowd for sure.
In a lot of ways, it looks like a Carpenter level with a little handle on it, and I always loved it.
And a muzzle flash when they shoot, when they actually trigger it.
Yeah, like a little flash. It's not really a laser. I guess it had some sort of more of an explosive or electrical charge.
Yeah.
So Logan does the interrogation after, he follows up, and he gets questioned about one of the items that he picked up, which is called an ankh, which is a real symbol, a real Greek symbol, and it's a little charm that somebody would either have in their pocket or wear on a necklace. He gets questioned about it. Does he know what it is? He obviously doesn't. And it turns out it's a symbol for the runners. I think an ankh signifies life. In real Egyptian culture, I think that's what an ankh signifies. And the computer gets him to participate in this investigation that he doesn't really understand what he's getting into, and the computer adds years onto him, in effect making him a runner. And they want him to become a runner to probably investigate, where are these people going? How can we stop this?
Right, in a way to become like an undercover cop.
So now suddenly he has to play the part of a runner,
infiltrate,
and that's how he gets involved with Jessica. They run into each other earlier. It was one of the runners that he killed was a friend of hers, but then it turns out she gets a little sympathetic with him because she realizes, well, yeah, I guess he's going to run. So she kind of is going to turn him in, but then they form a little bond and they both go on the run, and thus begins Logan's run. So it then becomes a little bit of a chase movie. So he's got to go and figure out, well, where are these runners going? What is the sanctuary? Sanctuary could be, a magical place where people go and they can live longer than 30. They don't really have much concept of that, but it must be someplace else, they figure, in, a different part of the city, or they don't really know. They're living in this domed environment. It's very sterile. In fact, it was filmed in a very modern-looking mall in Dallas, which still exists. You could actually go to a lot of... It's probably changed a little bit, but a lot of the water formations that you see and some of the lobby areas that you see for carousel and stuff were actually a mall. So when they're on the run, Logan is still playing the part of the good cop, and when he thinks he gets to a location that could be sanctuary and they're entertaining him and they're going to let him into it, he gives off a signal on his,
he's
on
like,
his
okay,
walkie-talkie.
come and get it, guys. Let's go.
That gets the Sandmen, all right, let's go. And it turns out that this wasn't sanctuary, and there's a lot of violence, a lot of people die. And coincidentally, in this scene and the scene right before it, an early role for Charlie's Angels, Farrah Fawcett Majors.
That's right.
And obviously she's very pretty, so everybody knows her as either Charlie's Angels, and there she is. But, she winds up getting killed, so it was a quick roll.
Plus, at this point, he's starting to now get a little concerned because of the fact that they come in and basically massacre everybody.
Yeah,
he
has to continue to go because he realizes, he didn't know that he had to go forward when he gave the little signal.
We're not done yet.
So they tell him, you continue this way and always go up. Well, it turns out in the melee, he and Jessica wind up on a freight-type elevator, which goes down. Whether it's a malfunction, it's set up that way, and he winds up going down to this frigid area, which is a little weird. It's almost like they're going into like an ice cave, an Eskimo-type area.
Yeah.
And they're walking around, and they're greeted by this robotic creature called Box. And it's a little weird also because it's a year before Star Wars, and this robot looks like a guy
something out of Lost in Space.
Yeah, it looks like a guy in a aluminum foil type costume, and his arms are moving like the robot from Lost in Space, and he talks silly, but it's like Roscoe Lee Brown doing this robot voice. Anyway, besides the fact that it's a silly looking robot,
it goes from being ridiculously silly to creepy
Yeah,
weird.
Because he wants them to get nude. Well, their clothes are wet, so I guess you want them to be comfortable. And they should take their thin, wet, sexy clothes off and put on these bearskin robes.
In a robotic voice. You must take off your clothes.
So I'm a youngster seeing this movie for the first time in 1976, which makes me probably, at the time, I was like 7 or 8. I'm like 7 or 8 years old, depending on when I saw this. And there's boobs. So I wasn't really looking at it. I know there's something for the ladies. I think you see Logan's buttocks, but
aside from the count of very inappropriately unusual nudity or sexual themes for a PG film, which we will be talking about in a few minutes, it's bizarre the fact that this robot is telling him to do these things, and the robot looks so fake, like you said before. The costume that this thing is wearing, it's like a combination of Captain Pike and, like you said before, aluminum foil and heating ducts. It's and the Tin Man.
I mean, I can see where people look down upon this movie, but it actually is a fun movie. But anyway, back to the thing. So now they're nude with these bearskin robes on them, and he's going to help them get more comfortable. Okay. And in reality, he's planning on freezing them. And they show a line of previous runners who were looking for sanctuary, all frozen nude as well in these ice bricks. And his job is to secure food, he says. And in reality, they're going to be mixed in with the food for the city with all the plankton and seafood.
Right, that's the implication.
And it's kind of a weird little thing.
Yeah, we don't know for sure if this is a malfunctioning robot that's doing weird stuff on its own and thinks he's creating food, or is he doing this for real for the city?
Yeah, my bet is that they don't realize how the city works and the implications. And it's like Soylent Green. They're people. This is how they run the city. The power, it seems, comes from the sea. The food comes from some of the people who ran. Who knows?
Maybe it's just supplementing.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's,
Or maybe the robot is completely berserk and doing crap on its own.
So they get themselves out of it. They wind up having a fight. There's a little gunplay involved. And they escape finally.
Move on to the next.
And the way where they escape, which is a little weird, they wound up going down, but they run a little bit, and they're out. They sense this heat, this warmth, and there's melting, and there's a crack in the cave, and they're outside. Now, we know what outside is, and we see it, and we see the sun.
Right.
These people have no idea. They don't realize what they are. But in reality, they're out of their domed environment, and now they're out in the real world.
And
we don't really know. We know this is in the 23rd century, but we really don't know where or what's going on. And they just start exploring, trying to figure out where this sanctuary could be. Maybe there is no sanctuary. This is all a big ruse. There's nobody else out here. It's just us. And finally, there's a bit of a surprise. And I think we've discussed this before on how the Planet of the Apes surprise and the little reveal of where they are. And this has a similar thing. And I think
this is more like a third act.
Yeah.
Reveal.
After 35 years, I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything here. But it turns out they're walking, and we know they're in Washington, D.C.
Right, you see,
and it's a very rundown,
pieces
overgrown.
Of monuments.
We see the Washington Monument. We see the Great Mall, and they're walking and they're continuing on their way, and they wind up at the Lincoln Memorial. And what's significant about this is, Lincoln looks like a man just like we know him as Lincoln, but they've never seen anybody that old. And they see Lincoln, the statue of Lincoln, with the beard, the old, craggly face, and that's as much of a shock to them as the fact that they're outside someplace else. That's what's so weird. But they continue along, and they wind up at the Capitol. And, they meet up with an old man. And they don't know who this person is. This old man is living as a recluse with a lot of cats in the Capitol. The Capitol is home. And he alludes to the fact that, he was born there and he grew up with his parents.
He doesn't know how old he is. He knows he's been there all his life, and he's just there.
He doesn't, and they don't know what parent. They're like, what do you mean parents? You knew your parents? You knew your mother and father? And she's like, yeah, I buried them. So it's kind of interesting how that plays out, that they're learning that there's more to life. This isn't just about sanctuary. But this is a whole different dynamic.
The thing is also that when they reach the outside and they're interacting now with this guy, the movie changes gears completely. It's a completely different vibe from inside the city and outside the city. It's almost like a different movie in terms of how jarring it is that these people are interacting in such a foreign location to them, as opposed to what they're normally used to, which is everything happening in the city, everything brought to them, everything being there at their leisure. Now they're outside kind of fending for themselves in a way.
I think it was very exciting for me when I saw that, because that same year I had visited Washington, D.C. for the first time. So these were places I had just been, and like I said, I'm only 8 years old, so I didn't have a lot of frame of reference. But it was really weird. It's like I was there, and like you almost want to get excited and tell people in the theater. But, I continued watching, and it turns out that they were continued to be followed by Francis, the other Sandman.
The Sandman.
And he is a loyal friend to Logan, but he realizes something fishy is going on, and he's kind of trying to save Logan and blame it on Jessica, that Jessica must have tried to like lure him into this and screw with his head a little bit like that, and they wind up fighting, and Francis gets killed.
Right. He tries to tell him all these things about how things are different.
And they try to convince him, look at his palm.
But he's completely phased out. He doesn't care. He wants to do his job, and that's what he's going to do.
Yeah. Francis tries to stick to it, but as soon as he sees his palm, he realizes, no, this must be a setup, something fishy. That's when the fight gets into high gear, and Francis, he has to die, and they bury him, and they realize, look, they have to go back because other people will just continue to come. If Francis made it that far, more people will come. They've got to go and convince them that there really isn't a sanctuary. There's outside, and if you can make it outside, you can live longer for whatever that's worth, but you don't have to die. That's the revelation that Logan finds out, and since he was commissioned to do this, there is no sanctuary. He figures he'll go back, he'll let them know. Well, there's probably corruption like in any society, because it seems as soon as he gets back, he tries to say, you can live. Don't go to Carousel. You can live. There's no sanctuary. It's a big ruse. Listen to us. Well, they whisk him away pretty fast. Like the guy who has the cure to cancer. Apparently, there's no money in the cure. The money is telling people we're trying to cure. And so he goes back. He tries to convince the city computer, look, there's no sanctuary. It doesn't exist. It's a ruse. We've been outside. And it's a little bit of a science fiction ending. You get the weird light show, some explosions, and the computer can't handle it because it's beyond its programming. And it just basically destroys the central computer system. And everybody kind of comes out, and they meet the old man, and they see him. And at the end, people realize, and like the girls can see him and touch his beard, and that they realize, okay, now I'm not sure that's a happy ending, because these are people who have been used to giving everything.
They're going to starve out there.
Their life is there for pleasure and sex and drugs and food and, fun. And now they're going to have to live. And, I'm sure there's going to be some implications on that.
The thing is also that, granted, this is science fiction, it's fantasy, but to me, when you get to the point where, okay, the plan is we're going back outside and we're going to just tell people of this wonderful thing we have, that's a pretty bad plan. And then the fact that the computer just cannot handle the overload of data in his head of what he's seen or whatever, that makes him beat the computer. Yeah. Again, it's kind of like a quick ending. It's kind of like, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're going to win. It's over. It didn't seem too thought out or too realistic, too convincing that this is the way to convince your people to come out and win or whatever it is.
It's got a fun look to it. It's definitely dated. There's been talk for years of a remake, kind of like the same, again, back to the Planet of the Apes. They're going to remake it. Now they finally did remake the Planet of the Apes. I think it's closer to a Logan's Run remake. It's just, it's hard to say what. I prefer not to, because I like the charm of it.
Now, as dated as it looks, it did win Best Special Effects that year, 1976. Had
they known what was the year away, people would have been like, let's save it. The effects kind of are big studio effects of the day. Rear projection type things.
To me,
and
what's more
light effects.
Oh, yeah. To me, the most memorable thing is the in the dome activity, the futuristic stuff. That was my favorite part. I'm not a big fan of once they get out. I mean, I did like the connections with the monuments, because that's like Planet of the Apes. He kind of like, woo. But again, this is a third act surprise, not a end of the film surprise. So once you get to the Capitol and you're dealing with the old man and the planets to come back in, it's kind of like, whatever. I lost a little bit of interest in the movie. But even within the city, there's a whole bunch of weird stuff, and we touched upon it a little bit before. This is a PG film this is obviously pre-PG-13, and when they deal with the subject of there's a little nudity here or there, there's that sex shop, whatever you want to call it, which is like, what the hell are we watching here? I had to fast forward it.
Nowadays
I had my kid watching.
It's barely anything now. You see that almost on regular TV.
But it's just weird.
As a little kid, I remember my parents thinking, maybe they should send me for popcorn or something. But it came and it went. A few years later, I was seeing Saturday Night Fever with the whole rape scene. So that's when they definitely sent me to get popcorn.
Go get the popcorn. Now, do you remember this film? I mean, other memorable things about it? Obviously, the music is something I know you like.
Music I love, Jerry Goldsmith music, and that
big name.
That holds up as far as an orchestration. And there's some futuristic type sounds in it if you listen to the soundtrack, which is kind of hard to get. But the Love Shop is that weird sci-fi kind of thing. But the orchestration, I think, keeps it grounded.
Now, did the movie, do you remember if there was any merchandising or anything that was made off this movie?
I recall that there was not really merchandise for this, but it turns out there was a spin-off. A TV show came out shortly after as a result of Star Wars. And I think companies started scrambling, saying, well, what do we have? And we got this Logan's Run. Let's make it. So that was awful.
Speaking of the TV series, from what I understand, it has been put on DVD. So have you had a chance to look at it?
Yeah, I love Logan's Run, as we've been discussing. But I can't say anybody should buy this. I mean, maybe you can rent it, borrow it from your library. But this really wasn't a good series when it aired. And I think they knew it. Gregory Harrison was the
Logan character?
Was the Logan character. And while they tried to do a really cheapo version of the movie in the pilot, when they wind up outside, they, again, talk about a creepy robot. It's not as creepy as Box, but they have a humanoid type robot who's wearing a green Sandman type outfit, but he looks like us. In fact, Donald Moffat played Rem, a robot that they made up that travels with them in this hover car.
A pretty big actor still these days.
Yeah, I mean, Clear and Present Danger, he played the president. So it's really bad, and I think they did it because they have it and they might make some money on fans like me. But it wasn't good then, and it's not any better now. It really feels like third-rate 70s sci-fi. They had a brand, and they were trying to cash in on it. So the uniforms are the same. The Dome City pictures are the same, but they're basically stock footage.
Oh, yeah.
And they basically reworked the movie to fit their new world and how they wanted to do it. It was a little goofy, and I'm disappointed. It's one of those things, like I said, you want it to hold up, but since I didn't have much respect for it when I first saw it, I'm not that disappointed how it turned out.
Do you remember watching this live?
Yeah, it was a big thing because Logan's Run was a big movie when it came out. Then Star Wars came out, and so anything that was science fiction that you liked, you wanted a piece of. So CBS would run the movie, because it was only 2 years old at the time, so it was still a big deal to watch it on CBS. There was no HBO and things like that. So when they realized they could get a series out of it to compete in the Star Wars era, I watched it. I was in, but it was not good. It only lasted a handful of episodes, barely a season, and some of them didn't even get aired. It's just terrible. And as a result of that, there was some merchandising. There was some Mego-style figures.
Oh, wow. But based on the TV show you're talking about, right?
Yeah, they had the look of the real characters, and they were called Logan and Jessica, but they were based on more of the Gregory Harrison look. The other stuff, there were some fan-produced guns, which I remember at some of the conventions I went to in the early 80s, I always wanted one. Or in the back of Starlog, they gave you blueprints of how to make the Battlestar Galactica gun or the Logan's Run type gun. But it was just something, I mean, I was not, ever going to be able to get my hands on. Now you could probably find a few fan-made ones that are really wonderful.
Now, I would also say, in the vein of this type of a film, if you're interested, the type of things I would look for is, for example, George Lucas's THX 1138. You get a little bit of that utopian society, very controlled, very mind control, drugs, and people trying to get away from that whole type of thing. And a more modern film that I strongly recommend, which is a very underrated film, I think it's The Island.
That has a lot of similarities in this without it being a direct remake.
A remake, yeah. I guess you get away with remaking it without giving
the ending was credit. A little different, the type of the reasoning of what they were there for. But
there is a twist.
Definitely, if you like one, check out the other.
Right. You have, like I said, THX is more of an art film, you could call it, because it's based on a student film that was then remade as a somewhat of a big budget studio production. But it does have an artsy flavor to it with Robert Duvall is in it. Pretty big name, not a big guy at the time that it was made. But The Island is Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson. So, those are some pretty big Hollywood names, and I think it's a Michael Bay film. So you're talking about big action, big special effects. But like James said before, Logan's Run is one of these films that every now and then, especially nowadays, where it's almost like the same way reality television has taken over a lot, remakes and reboots nowadays are happening every 5 minutes. And this is one of these films that every now and then you hear a little blip of, so and so is
Yep.
interested, and
Logan.
somebody's
For a
considering
while, Matt Damon is attached to something, and this and that, and whoever the big name youngish actor. Matt Damon's, 45 now or something, so he won't be playing a young Logan. But I keep hearing that they want to be more loyal to the book. And, there were some spin-offs over the years of it in the comics world and stuff. So it hasn't totally disappeared. It hasn't held up. It's not a Star Wars. It's almost like there's pre-Star Wars, BC and AD.
Right.
If you were before Star Wars, very little of sci-fi is revered, except for maybe 2001
was the last big blip before Star Wars.
Yeah, and then there are other good things. It just, they get forgotten about. And then after Star Wars, it's almost as every science fiction movie is like, it's no Star Wars.
No ET.
Or it got sold as the next Star Wars, and, very rarely did that hold up.
Now, you still might recognize some of the names. Michael York still worked after this.
Yeah,
he
number of
appeared
shows.
on many television shows.
He was on
He's done many
Sequest even.
movies. He's Austin Powers'
Basil Expedition. He was his boss.
So he still shows up every now and then. Some of the actors have died. Peter Ustinov died. Richard Jordan died, who also was a big television actor. But again, this is one of these films that don't be surprised, because sooner or later, somebody's going to greenlight this remake or reboot or something, and it'd be interesting to see how they could redo it. Plus, the latest I've heard in terms of somebody who might be attached to a possible remake of Logan's Run is the director of the current film Drive, Nicholas Winding Refn. Also attached is his star from that film, Ryan Gosling, which is a very unusual combination, if you ask me, because you're talking about a straight sci-fi film, and this guy is a very artsy kind of director. I mean, Gosling, it doesn't surprise me because, he's kind of like a pretty boy, flavor of the month type of actor. But what they did on Drive is very different, and for a sci-fi film, it would be a very interesting take on that subject matter. And, like I said before, you want to see something similar, go to THX or go to the island. So any final thoughts, James?
No, like I said, I don't look forward to any remakes. When I hear that, it kind of upsets me. Maybe because this is one of the early movies I saw and I looked fondly on. And it's like, I don't want them to change it, or I don't want the other one to be looked down upon or forgotten. So I'm not really excited about hearing remakes. But, every couple of years I put this in. I like the sounds, the music, the effects, and, I remember a lot of it. So it's just one of those favorites that I keep going back to.
I'll give you one final comparison in terms of if you want to see something like this. I would say on the comedy side, look for Woody Allen's Sleeper.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that low budget special effect looking stuff that kind of shows up here, and like the makeup and this and that. A lot of stuff kind of shows up the same. A lot of white. White is the way to go because you can hide a lot in white. But I would strongly recommend that one. And another memorable thing I remember about this film, especially in the opening sequence where they're showing you the city, the little cars that are traveling by are little round ball looking. And if you look carefully, they're actually ball bearings rolling on a track. And that's the trick.
It was a miniature that they put a lot of effort into, but it wasn't a miniature. It was probably as big as a gymnasium, this whole set.
Well, because it was miniature photography. They have to do a big set.
Yeah, but that particularly doesn't hold up. When it mixes with the live action stuff, you can kind of get a vibe that, wait a minute, that water just looks a little too calm or whatever. You figure it's indoors. It's not like it's a tide or anything like that. It's more like a reflecting pool. But that stuff you can see.
It makes Buck Rogers look like Star Wars as far as I'm concerned. But I would like to once again thank James for suggesting this particular film and going through it, because it's one of these, again, it's not exactly a blockbuster memorable film, but it does have a place on the genre of science fiction. And it does influence other things, and other things I'm sure has been influenced by it. And it's definitely worth taking a look at when you guys have a chance. So on behalf of everybody here, I would like to thank you for joining us here on Geekfest Rants. See you here next time. boop, 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 boop.
Stop.